Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, I'm Jamie B. I read a ton of books, and this is day 2 of our read along for 1776 by David McCullough. This book right here. So we did chapter 1 yesterday, chapter 2 today, which was a little longer. We started on page 20 of this book and went to page 70. So a little bit longer. There are pictures though, so it's not like it's a solid, 50 pages of text. Probably equivalent to like 30 to 40 pages of actual reading. So not terrible. And if you're like me, it's just reading. I actually this time read my giant book instead of reading my smaller text. The big one. Because it does actually explain next to the vellum envelopes what the things are. So if I actually read in this one, then I'm not trying to figure out at last minute what these things are as I pull them out of the envelope. So if you are not quite clued in yet to what we're doing, so in this big book, there are vellum envelopes that have reproductions of documents in them to go along with the text. So this is actually the illustrated edition, which is why it's ginormous. It has pictures. It has all sorts of stuff. Let's see. So the things we've seen already yesterday, we have the King's Speech. So here is a replica in nice paper, for that matter, of King George III's speech about the rebels in the colonies and what Britain's going to do about them. From January 8, 1776, Philadelphia, 10 o'clock a.m. I find it amusing that they do o'clock and a.m. Bit of a different standard there. And I will be reading this speech out loud in a separate video. So you can hear me reading it anyway. Printed by John Dunlap, a name I have heard of before. So actually we hear more about how this document happened and why it figures into all this in chapter 2. So one of the things that came through the British lines into the rebel camps was copies of this speech that arrived on one of the resupply ships for the British troops. And it took several months before this arrived in the colonies. So the speech was given in October, and it wasn't until the following January that it arrived in the States, or what would become the States. So, that's kind of fun. And also these things, these pictures, are some of the drawings, architectural drawings that King George III did. It was one of his hobbies, and he was considered quite good at it. They weren't meant for things that people would actually build exactly. They were just exercises, kind of for fun. And he was supposed to be quite literary and into the arts. And he did start the Royal Academy of Arts So that's sort of a king. So that's what these are. So you get some samples of the king's efforts. And still by the end of chapter 2, we're still in Britain. This is still British colonies. The rebels are rebels, but they haven't really owned the goal of independence yet. So, we're still in Britain. The king is still the king. So then we get to chapter 2 and getting into our new documents. So one of the things I found amusing in chapter 2 is we have a picture of a military pamphlet that one of the rebel military leaders was able to acquire for himself. Nathaniel Greene was able to buy books and pamphlets, and this is one he bought. But I found it really amusing in the fine print of it. The price in boards, $1, and bound 10 shillings. So that would be the equivalent of hardback and paperback. I think I have a journal somewhere that would be in boards. So I'll see if I can find that for next time. It's not quite like our hardbacks. But yeah, so that's kind of fun. And then we'll get to our documents. And there's 2 vellum envelopes for chapter 2. All right. So in our first envelope for chapter 2, looks like we have 2 letters. There's one. We even have a carefully clipped out little hole where the original letter was damaged. So it's very much like we have this relic from the past. It's very hard to read. Paper would have been harder to come by. So instead of starting over on fresh paper, you just scratch it out. At least we don't have overwriting. Because some letters like this, you'd use up your sheet of paper and then you'd turn it sideways and write sideways over the text and just keep going. So it could be harder. There is supposed to be a transcript for both of these letters in the book. So that's nice because the handwriting on these is a little challenging. Even for someone like myself that can read cursive, yes. This one's 1775. And it is June 18. So this must be Washington's letter to Martha, and the other one is Abigail's letter to John Adams. So yeah, this one is also not the easiest object to read. There is a transcript in the book, though. I like that the paper has been artistically treated, so it looks stained and old. That's kind of fun. And on this side, there's that ink mark where it's got a blob of ink. It's a little bit smudged in places. That's so much fun. And the papers are different too. Let's see. Oh, and he wrote several pages. Oh, fancy. So the letter from Abigail to John Adams. Let me pick up a picture of Abigail Adams. Okay. So here's Abigail Adams. So her letter is writing to tell her husband that their friend Joseph Warren had been killed in Bunker Hill. Bunker Hill is a battle that the British technically won, but their losses were huge. And it takes a while for that information to filter back to Britain. They don't realize just how costly these battles are right away. So at that time, they're still talking about the war as if, oh, they're just putting down a silly little skirmish and it'll be done before tea time kind of thing. So anyway, so one of their friends has died in Bunker Hill. A handsome young physician and leading patriot, allied with Samuel Adams and Paul Revere. Warren had been one of the worthiest men of the province. My bursting heart must find vent at my pen, says Abigail Adams. Let's see, 234. Ooh, my goodness. I almost need a magnifier for the text in the back, too. Yeah, if you're playing with this sort of book, you might have one of those desk magnifiers on hand, too, because if you're familiar at all with the Oxford English Dictionary and how they just make the text smaller and give you a magnifier, that's what they've kind of done with the transcripts, too. They are tiny, like 2-point font. So, yeah, I will read the letters in separate videos as well, because that's going to require bright lighting and probably some practice to offset the tininess of this script. And I've got my glasses on. The lighting is not that bad, and it's tiny. Oh, my goodness. But they are here, so I will read those for everybody, and it'll be separate videos that'll be in the same playlist. So that will work. And then we also have 2 or 3 other documents in this section. So we have Washington's commission. So Washington was commissioned by the Continental Congress. So at this point, he's not in charge. He's been put in charge of the army. So the Continental Congress has chosen George Washington to lead the army. And so here is a replica of his commission. George Washington formally accepted his new command on June 16, 1775. 3 days later, Continental Congress conferred this commission. Although Washington privately expressed reluctance about the position in letters to Martha and others, he had attended Congress in his splendid blue and buff uniform, thereby plainly signaling that he was available. If he saw the responsibility of the command as too great for his ability, it was because he had a realistic idea of just how immense that responsibility will be. For such a trust to lead an undisciplined, poorly trained volunteer force of farmers and tradesmen against the best trained, best equipped, most formidable military force on earth, and which, with so much writing on the outcome, was in reality more than anyone was qualified for. So that's this. And it's fun that it's a different shape of paper. It's not your standard A4 or anything. It's very different dimensions of paper from what I was expecting. So that's kind of fun. And then we have some maps. We have Washington's map of Boston. And that would be this one, which is more hand drawn. It was clearly done with an ink pen. Not nearly as big. Yeah, it's just a very sparse attempt at mapping things. So the true situation of His Majesty's army and also those of the rebels versus the crude sketch that he drew. Okay. So this one is Washington's map of Boston. So it's just basically a little hand-drawn sketch. A crude sketch that Washington drew of Boston in a letter to his brother John on July 27, 1775. And as he explained, this map, though rough, will give you some small idea of the situation of Boston and Bay on this side, and also of the posts that they have taken in Charlestown Neck and Bunker's Hill and our posts. So it's very, very crude. And we've got some markings here that kind of give positions of other things. But here's Boston, and it's not very big. It's not modern Boston by any means. So in contrast to the crude drawing that we saw from Washington's letter to his brother, here's what the British map of Boston looks like. This is William's map of Boston. And it is quite a bit more professional, and it's in color. It's definitely not just a crude pen sketch. And there's talk in the text about how the guy doing the map was very concerned about the openness of the prostitution industry in Boston. And it seemed like they put it on the map according to the text, but I don't see anything. It may be on here and I just don't notice it, but that was really funny. So anyway, so we've got these 5 documents. I have 2 letters to read out of this group that I'll do a video for. Put these guys away. Okay. This way. Alrighty. All right, so we also have a whole nother envelope in this group, in which we have another letter from Washington to Martha, an invitation, a letter from Nathaniel Greene to Samuel Ward, and an ambrotype of Continental Soldier. So, like an early photograph of a soldier. Let's pull these out. So first we have the letter to Martha. Let's see. Make sure that I got the right one here. Yep. My dearest. That's what it's addressed to. And look at how much different this one is compared to that long letter. So now we're getting into proper wartime. Paper is really, really not as available, and time for writing is a lot less. So that's interesting, because this is compared to that multi-page brown letter that we saw. And I'll do this one in that reading out the letters video too. It's much shorter. Um, so ultimately, and we haven't gotten there yet, but somewhere later in the story, Martha actually travels to stay with her husband, and she ends up actually living kind of rough in similar conditions to the soldiers for quite a while, apparently. So we're not quite there yet, but so we have a second letter from George Washington to his wife. We have an invitation, and this is sent from the General and Mrs. Washington to Colonel Henry Knox and his wife Lucy, requesting the favor of their company at dinner on Friday half after 2:00. And it literally is just a pen paragraph written on this card that says just that. So nothing fancy, definitely nothing like printed, just they wrote it out and handed it off to them as a little card, and there we go, there's your invitation. So that's fun. And we have Green letter to Ward. Nathaniel Green was a gentleman who turned out to be very good at leading his men in the military, despite not having some of the training and background that some of the others had. So a bit of a natural. His handwriting, it's hard to read in this replica, but it's beautiful handwriting. That's what we should all be aspiring to in writing cursive. It's lovely. It's all even, and it all has a uniform slant, and yeah, very elegant writing, especially for a dude. I'm impressed. So he is, let's see, at some point in here, he's discussing Washington to Samuel Ward. And Samuel Ward was a Continental Congress delegate. So that's that context. And then we have the ambrotype of Continental Soldier. So this is a photograph of a man who, at this point in this photo, is quite a bit older than he was when he served. He served when he was 18, and when he was over 100 years old, his photo was taken and he was interviewed about serving in the Revolutionary War. So this is an early photograph. It gives you some idea of how far back we are in technology, that we're looking at a photograph of a guy that, had been serving in this war 80 years prior. And we're finally getting a photograph of somebody. So those are fun. I will be doing some reading letters out loud and that speech. I've been thinking about how to do it where it's semi-acting. We'll see. I haven't done anything theater related for a while, but I might see what I can do. And then we're going to be starting on chapter 3, which has its own vellum envelopes. Let's see what the pages are for chapter 3. And I'm going from the smaller book to get the pages. So chapter 3 gets us to the end of this first section, which is called The Siege. And so chapter 3 is called Dorchester Heights. It starts at page 70 and it finishes up at page 113, I think. So about 45 pages, give or take a few. So not as long as chapter 2, but not as short as chapter 1. Not bad. And if you just have the smaller editions of this book, there are some color plates in this edition too. So we do get, we have an older picture of King George, for example. Let's see if we can straighten that up. So there's King George, a little bit older in that picture. He was crowned at age 22, and in 1775, he had been reigning for 15 years. So he's not that old. And George Washington was 43, I believe, when he accepted his commission. I think it was Jefferson that was in his 30s, like 32, 33. So these guys are all like 30s, 40s. We're not talking like people that would be, experienced, well-established dudes. These are people that have the energy and the motivation and haven't yet been ground down by society into believing it won't work, or something like that. So, yeah. Let's see if we have any more good pictures in here. We have Henry Knox. Nathaniel Green. Yes. So here's Nathaniel Green in the big picture. That's the dude that's writing the letter to the Continental Congressman. So he's a fairly successful general. Or is he a general? Yes, he is. He's a general. And then we have Washington. Yeah. All right. Join me tomorrow for more fun with opening up envelopes. And we'll see what else we have to look at to supplement our reading of this book. And I will probably do some reading of letters and speeches tomorrow when the lighting is good, so that I can see the 2-point font without making my eyes really mad at me. So there may be some extra little readings in the playlist for this project by tomorrow night. So let me know how you're doing with this book, where you are in it, and what are you thinking of it. And do you have any favorite characters or things that you didn't realize were the way they were, or things like that? How does it compare to other books or media that you've consumed about the Revolutionary War era? I know I find it interesting going from the Hamilton musical to this book, how much Hamilton is part of the story in Hamilton, and how absent Hamilton is from the story in this book. Um, so that's an interesting and very obvious difference. But I'm sure there's other things that are quite a bit different from one narrative to another of this period in history. So what sticks out for you? What do you like? What do you dislike? Um, are there bits that you think would make great novels? I know for me there are a couple things that stuck out that that they're a novel in and of itself. There's one in chapter 2. There's a bit about how he's one of the military leaders marries a girl whose parents are loyalists, and one of them is like the secretary for one of the governmental divisions of the British government in the colonies. And so when her parents leave to go back to Britain, she stays and never sees her parents again, and sneaks out of Boston to be with her her husband, or husband to be at that point. That paragraph could be a whole novel in itself. And there's probably a few others that they're just a sentence or a paragraph in this much bigger narrative, but you could easily imagine fleshing it out into a really good novel. So there's all sorts of stuff in this story. Anyway, I will let you get back to your reading, and I will see you in the next of these videos tomorrow, if I don't see you before then. So happy reading, and I will see you soon. Bye.